Good evening. I am Ike Brown, along with my wife Candy. We are proud to serve as event chairs for the 2021 Hope for Humanity event. Welcome and thank you for being a part of this special evening, whether virtually or in person, and for your generous support of this important event that raises critical funding for the museum's educational mission and year-round work.
In the 1970s, a group of survivors had a dream to create a memorial and educational center for their loved ones who perished in the Holocaust. A little more than 2 years ago, their dream became a reality when we opened the doors to the new Dallas Holocaust and Human Rights Museum. Our survivors are the foundation of the museum's mission to teach the history of the Holocaust and advance human rights to combat prejudice, hatred, and indifference. It is for this reason that each year we gather to pay tribute to these inspirational upstanders of yesterday, today, and forever.
The Holocaust was the deliberate and calculated murder of approximately 6 million Jews by the Nazis and their collaborators. Our survivors are undeniable proof of the power of the human spirit over suffering. Their testimonies are compelling reasons to fight Holocaust denial and anti-Semitism, as well as inspiring narratives that foster empathy, hope, and resilience. Tonight, we are honored to pay tribute to Max Glauben as this year's honoree. After witnessing, experiencing, and surviving the unimaginable during the Holocaust, Max has dedicated his life to honoring his family's memory and the memory of the other 6 million Jews by sharing his personal story through the lens of compassion and understanding. Tikkun Olam is the Hebrew phrase for acts undertaken to repair the world, to make the world a better place for all. Max practices Tikkun Olam each and every time. He shares his Holocaust story. He teaches us that education is the key to repair and to prevent future Holocausts. We are not born with hatred in our hearts. It is learned, and as such, it can be unlearned. Max continues to teach us that together, all of us can build a community changed for the better and to never give up. We'd like to close our remarks with gratitude. Thank you to our inspirational honorary co-chairs and host committee for your dedicated support of this event and for inviting so many of your friends and family to join us tonight. Thank you to everyone joining us here in person or by way of our virtual broadcast. Your generous contributions allow the museum to continue its important work and to offer the majority of its public programming free of charge. Thank you to Board Chair Mark Zilberman and my fellow members of the Board of Directors. By supporting this important institution and its mission, with your time and service, you are making a positive impact in our North Texas community and beyond for today and for generations to come. Thank you to President and CEO Mary Pat Higgins and your incredible team for everything you do, day in and day out, year after year, to ensure that this history is not forgotten. And finally, thank you to Max and all the members of our survivor community. You are our heroes and our inspiration. When we are with you, we are reminded that there is hope in hopelessness and that hope for humanity lies within each of us. Enjoy the evening, and thank you again for being part of it.
All right, let me take attendance. The Dallas Holocaust and Human Rights Museum is important to me because there's a whole nother level of experience and reality when you go into a physical structure that has artifacts and displays that you cannot replicate any other way. And so I know our kids, it's like it hits them in the face. It's become part of our academic culture. that we will go to the museum.
I think the greatest thing that I learned is empathy, to see these situations and to not only say, oh, this is terrible, but, oh, this is terrible. Why is this happening? We need to do something about this.
North Texas needs a museum like the Dallas Holocaust and Human Rights Museum because we teach about the consequences of unchecked prejudice and hatred. We use the Holocaust as the paradigm of genocide that we start with, but we end looking at the evolution of rights in the United States and the journey that different groups have been on to ensure that their community enjoys the same rights that all citizens in the U.S. enjoy. We open minds, one student at a time. We challenge students to think critically and become upstanders. An upstander is someone who sees something wrong and works to make it right. Someone who stands up for their rights and for the rights of others, and who works to combat unfairness, inequality, or injustice.
A lot of people don't want to stand up because, they're shy, they're embarrassed. They don't want to, feel like, oh, why is he standing up for me? But, it's okay to stand up for other people that, can't stand up. And then maybe one day, if they're in that same situation, they could stand up for another person to motivate them to do their best.
The Dallas Holocaust and Human Rights Museum is literally everywhere.
I think an upstander is someone who stands up for others even though they don't have to.
I am so proud of our amazing education team. We've got this wonderful menu of options now. We can be a resource for teachers and meet them where they need us to be.
I just think the world of the Dallas Holocaust and Human Rights Museum, the museum pivoted very quickly during COVID in creating the virtual tours. It was fantastic for my students to be able to speak with the docent and ask questions and see the exhibits, especially for the different genocides that we didn't have a chance to talk about in class, but also make connections with those that we did.
The Dallas Holocaust and Human Rights Museum is a wonderful resource for teachers. The museum helps me develop my lessons. It's all packaged very neat and organized in a Google Drive. I'm emailed a package that I can go through, and it's formatted for teachers in a lesson plan style. Can't wait to see what else we're going to do in the future.
The most interesting part of my visit to the museum was all the visual representation that I got. Everything was just so impactful and meaningful. It was memorable, and it's something that I will always remember. I learned the dangers of discrimination and that it is important to be an upstander.
We are thrilled to be launching this year an upstander partnership with Coppell ISD. We have known for years that a visit to the museum can be life-changing, and that's why we're so excited to work closely with that district to provide content to help teach their students about upstander behavior beginning in kindergarten and going all the way through 12th grade.
Coppell ISD is joining with the Upstander Partnership because we believe that it aligns with our core values and our mission. Our mission of the district is to build relationships that positively impact each other and the world. And so to be able to do so in a way that does promote kindness, leadership skills, inclusivity, it's just really a perfect marriage of what we're doing as a school district and what you all are doing with the Upstander program.
We are partnering and sponsoring the Upstander Club here at New Tech High at Coppell. I wrote on here, what is an upstander? Why is upstander behavior important? And then how do I promote upstander behavior? And then we had them take markers and without speaking, go around and write their thoughts.
Our hope is at the end of this year that we can roll this partnership out to other districts.
No matter how normal a person can seem to the outside world, they might have something going on the inside that you do not know about. At Venus, we make sure to have all of the students completely plugged into the Holocaust and making sure that that's where their main focus is.
The Dallas Holocaust and Human Rights Museum is more than just bricks and mortar. It is a place of education. It's a place of reflection. It's a place that someone, hopefully as they go through the exhibits, comes out as a different person than when they first entered the museum.
That they will internalize what they see and what they hear, and that when they're confronted making those difficult decisions, that they will choose to be an upstander instead of a bystander.
We're going to need the Holocaust and Human Rights Museum for a long time. Hate has been around for as long as people have been around, and I don't see it going away anytime soon. This is not a war we win, it's a battle we fight every day, and we will need to continue to fight it well into the future.
Please welcome to the stage President and CEO of the Dallas Holocaust and Human Rights Museum, Mary Pat Higgins.
Oh my goodness. It is so wonderful to see all of you here tonight. It's a tonic. So as the voice of God said, I'm Mary Pat Higgins. I'm the president and CEO of the museum. And I'm finishing my 9th year at the museum, which has just been so incredible. Yeah. It is an incredible pleasure to welcome you all to tonight's event. First, I'd like to extend a huge thank you to Candy and Ike Brown, our event chairs, for their Thank you so much for your incredible support, your gifts of time and treasure to this event and to everything that museum has done. It makes a huge difference, and I'm eternally grateful for your support. I'd also like to give a warm thank you to our honorary co-chairs and our host committee who helped to make this event such a success. Thank you all so much. We couldn't have done this without you. And to everyone here with us tonight, and to those of you joining virtually, several hundred of you, thank you for so generously supporting this important fundraiser. It's because of each of you that we are able to fulfill our mission to teach the history of the Holocaust and advance human rights, to combat prejudice, hatred, and indifference each and every day. I'd also like to welcome a very special group of people with us tonight. We have some elected officials in the audience with us. We have 4 city council members, Janie Schultz, Kara Mendelson, Adam Bazaldua, Jesse Moreno. And we have Chief of Police, Dallas Police, Chief Eddie Garcia. And the Dallas Chief of Equity Inclusion, Liz Cedillo-Perea. We are so thankful for all that the city does to support the museum. And Chief Garcia, I had the pleasure to actually talk with before he even moved to Dallas in a mayor's panel. So we're really excited that you're here tonight, and we're thankful for everything you do to keep us safe. So as you saw in our welcome video, education is at the heart of our mission. Students today are confronted daily with communities that are divided, groups that are intolerant, individuals that act violently out of hatred, and a world in need of unity. The lessons of the Holocaust illustrate what can happen when prejudice and hatred go unchecked. What can happen when we allow discrimination to pervade, when we see something wrong but do nothing to make things right. When students visit our museum or participate in a classroom program, we're not only teaching them historical facts, we teach them to think about cause and effect, that individual actions have consequences, good and bad. We teach them how one person can make a difference, even in the darkest of times. We show them how they can be upstanders, even though it may be scary to stand up, speak out, and do what is right. And I'm so proud of our museum for ensuring that students throughout our community can access our educational resources, whether it be online or in person at the museum. We've even developed new programming that reaches elementary students as early as kindergarten with age-appropriate lessons around themes like kindness and inspiring upstander behavior. I'm thinking we need to offer that to some adults too. What do you think? Yeah. And I'm excited to tell you about our new Upstander partnership that we are piloting with Coppell ISD this year and hopefully rolling out to many more districts in the coming years. It integrates social-emotional learning, civics, and inclusive education through a consistent and engaging cross-curricular plan for kindergarten through 12th grade. Awesome. Who was that? Now, just think of the impact we can have if we can work with teachers and students every year. Now, kindness, caring, perseverance, responsibility, and compassion can be learned and must be taught, and we are teaching it. So, thank you. Thanks to your generous support, we have flourished through really challenging times to serve tens of thousands of students through virtual offerings, and that's something to celebrate. So thank you so much. Now, tonight, we are also celebrating someone who exemplifies the work we do every single day, Max Glauben. You only have to meet Max once to know that you will never forget him. It's always heartening to hear a story from someone Max has met and made an indelible mark on. Someone who remembers exactly where they were when they met him, maybe decades ago. There's so many things that make Max unforgettable. The twinkle in his eyes, his ability to get right to the heart of the matter, the joy and pride that are so evident when he talks about his family, his honesty, strength, and optimism, his gratitude. Max has an extraordinary spirit with an unflagging commitment to education and to making this world a better place. I love him dearly and count myself very fortunate to know him, and I know all of you in the audience tonight feel the same way. I can't wait for you all. Sorry. So I didn't bring my Kleenex up to the stage, so that's all I'm saying about Max tonight. But I can't wait for you all to hear more about our dear Max a little later in the program. But I also want to talk about a group of amazing people of whom Max is a part. No group of people embodies the spirit of tonight's event of hope for humanity more than our Holocaust survivors. Despite living through unimaginable inhumanity, they are beacons of kindness, faith, and strength. The Dallas Holocaust and Human Rights Museum would not exist without our survivors' commitment to education and to creating a better world for generations that follow their examples. I know several of our survivors are here tonight, and many are watching from home, and I want to thank each of you for inspiring us every day to be upstanders. You, please applaud for that. You give us hope that every positive difference we make, big and small, has an even greater impact on those around us. Now, I invite you to turn your attention to the screens for a heartfelt tribute to our Holocaust survivors, refugees, hidden children, and kinder transportees, the foundation and inspiration behind our mission and our work.
Please welcome 2021 Board Chair of the Dallas Holocaust and Human Rights Museum, Mark Zilberman.
Hi, everyone. As the announcer said, I'm Mark Zilberman, board chair of the Dallas Holocaust and Human Rights Museum. It's great to be together with all of you tonight, in person after all these months. Welcome also. I wish I could actually see everybody, the lights. Welcome also to those joining us virtually. As Mary Pat said, there's several hundred. I'd really like to thank my fellow board members. You're an amazing group of extremely accomplished individuals, and it is a privilege to serve along each of you. There's something truly special about a group of people from different backgrounds coming together with a common goal to support our mission. Thank you all for being champions of the museum. I also want to thank the museum staff for their outstanding work in making the Dallas Holocaust and Human Rights Museum a premier institution and a go-to partner for many organizations in the North Texas area, including local governments and corporations. When the pandemic forced us to temporarily close our doors in March 2020, this incredible team rallied together and strategized a plan to keep our donors, our members, students and teachers, and our community engaged with our mission. They created vital programming, virtual programming that expanded our reach not only outside of the Dallas-Fort Worth area, but outside the state of Texas and to other parts of the world. COVID did have some advantages with that. They also developed meaningful and impactful film documentaries. I don't know if you remember last year's Hope, Strength, and Resolve video that honored Texas liberators and our local Holocaust survivors. And then this past spring, Music in the Camps shared an inspiring narrative on this side of Holocaust history told through the voices of survivors. Though the end result is seemingly effortless, your work does not go unnoticed by me, by my fellow board members, and by everyone with us tonight. Thank you. And I would particularly like to thank and give a shout out to Barbara Cunha-Taylor, Director of Special Events. Director of Special Events, including tonight's event. You make it easy on everyone involved with your skill, hard work, and organization. Thank you, Barbara. Now I'm going to do my job and ask you for money. In a time when deep divisions are felt throughout our country and beyond, the museum's mission to teach the history of the Holocaust and advance human rights to combat prejudice, hatred, and indifference has never been more important. On your table, you'll find a QR code printed on a card. Works just like the menus you've been at a bunch of restaurants with. So I invite you to pull out your phones, click on that code, and consider making a tax-deductible donation. This support provides critical funding for the museum's year-round work, including educational programs like the Candy Brown Holocaust and Human Rights Educator Conference, programs for law enforcement professionals, virtual and in-person student field trips, and so much more. And I'm thrilled to announce that through the generosity of one of our longtime supporters, each gift tonight will be matched dollar for dollar up to $25,000. This means that the impact of your gift is instantly doubled. Thank you for investing in our mission. Now, it's my privilege to say a few words about tonight's honoree, Max Glauben. Max was only 11 when Germany invaded his hometown of Warsaw, Poland. He survived starvation and disease in the Warsaw Ghetto, selection in the Majdanek death camp, slave labor in 4 other concentration camps, and a death march before finally being liberated by the U.S. Army in 1945. As a teenager, he lost his entire family and endured the worst of humanity. If you know Max today, it's nearly impossible to believe that someone so full of life and joy could have gone through so much tragedy. And yet, To know Max is to know his story. For 40 years, Max has dedicated his life to sharing his journey, honoring his family's memory, and delivering his message to never, never, never give up. He doesn't shy away from the cruelty he endured, but he uses his experiences to teach us about the consequences of hatred and the difference that one person can make when they stand up against injustice. In the late 70s, Max was part of a group of local Holocaust survivors who came together with the goal of creating a museum where they could remember their loved ones and educate future generations about the devastating horrors of the Holocaust. He has dedicated his life to this work, from the museum's first home at the Jewish Community Center in 1984 to the move downtown in 2005 to the 2019 opening of the Dallas Holocaust and Human Rights Museum, a dream 40 years in the making. Max, from all of us who have ever been involved with the museum, it has been a privilege to follow in your footsteps. You are an inspiration to us all. And now I want to invite you to turn your attention to the screens for a very special tribute to our 2021 Hope for Humanity honoree, Max Glauben.
1928, Warsaw, Poland, a child is born. I'm Max Glauben. My name is Max Glauben. Max Glauben. My name is Max Glauben. The Max was just created by myself after liberation, but in Poland it was Maniek, and also in the Hebrew was Mendel. My family consisted of my father, Yitzhak Isaac Glauben, and my mother's name was Feiga Glauben, and my little brother named Haniek.
Max's early years were spent in the Jewish quarter of Warsaw, Poland.
Well, I remember living with my parents in a very comfortable apartment, and the city of Warsaw was a metropolitan city. When the war started, I think it lasted maybe 2 weeks. In fact, one whole day, there were nothing but planes circling the city of Warsaw and dropping leaflets stating that if the city of Warsaw does not surrender, they were going to flatten it completely. But in the meantime, the thing that was worried us worse was the fear of what the Germans would do with the Jews.
The Nazis quickly curtailed Jewish rights. Starting on September 21st, 1939, Jewish communities were ordered to establish Judenrat, or Jewish councils. In October, the first ghetto was established at Piotrków Trybunalski. In November, all Jews were required to wear white armbands with blue Jewish stars. The following year, in the fall of 1940, the Germans established the Warsaw Ghetto and forced the inhabitants to build a wall to separate it from the rest of the city.
You're talking about a confined area of approximately 1 square mile with all the people from Warsaw plus the surrounding areas were placed in there. There were rules made that in the Warsaw Ghetto, you shouldn't have any money, you shouldn't have any jewelry, you shouldn't have any furs. If you were found with any of the above-mentioned items, you were automatically shot.
Max's family already lived in the area designated as the ghetto. Life was dramatically changing for them as well. Like many ghetto inhabitants, Max's father was forced to quit his job.
The inhabitants of the ghetto had to go to work, either in sewing factories or manufacturing uniforms for the Germans or involved with some kind of work. In the same apartment, in the back of it was a coal yard. And these people were good friends of my father's. They took him into the business, gave him a job, If you were working, you would receive a bona. A bona was certificates like food stamps, and sometimes a family member would start early at 6 o'clock in the morning to stand for rations. Then by the time he gets to the door, they wouldn't have any food because they were limiting the amount of food that was coming in. That's where we got involved in smuggling of food under the coal in double-bottom wagons and double-sided wagons. If something was smuggled back into the ghetto, it had to be packaged in such a manner that it would fit, and they could pre-arrange these things, and they have a lot of runners like myself, and usually you'll see that they had blonde hair and blue eyes. So if you went on a mission, you were not pointed out, there is a Jew. Or the youngsters like myself would have coats with maybe 50 or 60 pockets. And in groves, we would run through the gates, hoping that if they start shooting, maybe they kill 2 or 3, and some of us would survive.
Some of these children were caught upon their return to the ghetto and dealt with by the German authorities. In October 1940, all Jews in Warsaw were ordered into the ghetto. In mid-November, the ghetto was sealed, and conditions worsened dramatically.
And of course, we not only had to cope with hunger and thirst, we had to cope with diphtheria, typhoid, dysentery. I don't think there was a disease that was known to the human race that did not exist in the Warsaw Ghetto.
In July 1942, the Nazis ordered the Judenrat to hand over 6,000 Jews a day for resettlement in the East, marking the start of the Great Deportation. In truth, from July to September, about 300,000 Jews were shipped to the Treblinka death camp.
A lot of children were left as orphans. These are the children that would go out on the streets and become beggars, and an awful lot of them died on the streets like that.
On April 19, 1943, the eve of Passover, the liquidation of the Warsaw Ghetto began. As German forces entered, Jewish resistance fighters responded with bullets and Molotov cocktails, forcing the surprised Nazis to retreat.
The Jewish underground knocked on the door, came in and said, we're going to set up some posts at your windows. They told all of us to get into the shelter. Within about 3 or 4 hours, the artillery and German armor was moved into the ghetto, and our apartment was destroyed by fire.
SS Major General Jürgen Stroop was pulled from the front line to crush the ghetto resistance. His solution was to burn the ghetto to the ground using artillery, bombs, and flamethrowers.
Anybody that lived or was hiding in the apartments above ground perished. Only the ones that hid in the basements were able to survive.
On May 16th, the remaining Jews were either killed or captured. Max and his family were taken to a staging area with other survivors and searched for valuables.
And it was the last time that we really sat together and spoke.
Survivors were then loaded on a boxcar, destined for the Majdanek concentration and death camp.
A trip that should have taken maybe 2 or 3 hours from Warsaw took 6, 7 days. 120, 130 people on the boxcar that I was in. 80 dead by the time we got there. I also remember the little opening. I look out there and see green leaves, and I says, why do I have to be inside here when everything is growing so beautifully in blue skies and the birds chirping? And I just couldn't understand it. At Majdanek, the cars were opened and we were asked to jump out of the car. I was standing next to my father, and my mom was next to my little brother. They stopped the procession. They counted 100 men, for a work detail, and then they said, women and children continue. And I was going to go with my mother and my little brother, and my dad held my hand and says, no, you stay with me.
That was the last time that I saw any member of my family.
Max's mother and younger brother were murdered at Majdanek.
I was then placed on another boxcar and taken to Budzi the following day, and I was initiated into a concentration camp for slave labor in an airplane factory.
We went out on a Friday about 3 weeks into that camp. When we came back, there were 3 people missing. They decided to take 10 hostages for each person that was missing. My father was taken as one of the hostages. When I got up Saturday morning, some of the bodies were missing, and in their place, their shoes. I realized by seeing my father's boots that he was gone.
In that moment, young Max was determined to survive. For all he knew, he was the last surviving member of his family, the last person alive with the Glauben name. In the end, the Nazis realized they had miscounted the prisoners. Max's father, along with half of the hostages, died from a mistake.
I ended up in the carpenter shop, and because I'm mechanically inclined, I became a pattern maker for airplane parts of the Messerschmitt and Heinkel.
The guy that I was working under was a murderer. He would come in the morning, he would take a wooden chair and take one of the legs and start picking at somebody and use him as an example if we do any sabotaging, and start beating him up until the guy was dead. And then I was moved to Mielec, and that's where I was tattooed with the letters KL, which stand for Konzentrationslager in German. And I worked there under him again till the second half of 1944. Then I was moved to a camp that was in the salt mines. There was a factory in the salt mines of Wieliczka in Poland, and we stayed there less than a week. So we were transported to Flossenburg, Germany. This was one of the first camps that I was placed with other nationalities. April the 16th, 1945, I was then called out at 5 a.m. in the morning, and that all the Jews, and only the Jews, should fall out. We were placed in boxcars. We were told that we're going to our final destination. And we were shut up by the Allied fighter planes. Some British, some American. When they were flying and saw the trains, they thought they were military trains, so they shut them up. So we were just innocent victims, and we lost between 300 and 400 people. And that's when we started on a march that ended on April the 23rd, when we were liberated by the 3rd United States Army.
Having experienced the worst mankind had to offer through the darkness of the Holocaust, now a young man, liberated and free, stands on the shores of a new country. What kind of life is this child to build for himself?
Kids always grow up and say, well, who's your hero? And you say your father. And to me, it's not a cliche, it's the truth.
You know, he was just a happy-go-lucky guy and woke up early, went to work, supported his family.
I don't think Dad started out expecting to be Max the survivor as the biggest part of his identity. He was so many other things. He was a terrific dad, he's a terrific grandfather. Now, thank God, he's a terrific great-grandfather.
I think what makes my grandfather such a special individual is his ability to persevere.
I know that everybody says, well, he is a survivor, but he had to work, and he had to be cunning, and he had to figure out skills that he probably didn't even know he had.
To live with what he had been through and not have this jaded outlook towards the world, this anger deep down inside, speaks a lot to who he is as a person.
The ability for him to continue to share it just enlightens more and more people throughout the world to continue to be an upstander and embrace that hatred is not something that should be allowed on this planet.
His life has had a really dark start, but it's grown into just the brightest light you could imagine.
He wants the family to know what he went through, but he wants the family to, keep this story, share the story, let everyone out there know what can come from such a bad thing.
It was when I was 14 or 15, I was in Brandeis AZA in Dallas, and it was my turn to plan a program.
He says, "Do you have any ideas?" And I looked at him and I said, "He's sitting right over there." I don't know that it was the first time that he ever spoke, to a group, but it was certainly the first time that he spoke to a group of the kids' friends.
And there were a lot of wet eyes in the room from, 13 to 18-year-old kids who had never been exposed to the Holocaust.
I wish that I had been in the room with the original survivors when they met in I think, Mike Jacobs' living room, to talk about starting a museum. Originally, their goal was to honor and memorialize their loved ones who were murdered. But very quickly, that transformed into education, to honor them through education.
I picked up Max from the airport myself, and I asked him if he would mind stopping by our alternative campus. And he spent over an hour talking to them, and these were troublemaker kids who weren't. And he told them a bad decision does not make a person a bad person. He could get to those kids, and they loved him for it. And I think they will remember him for a long time.
And Max in particular has been a beacon to our congregation and to the community as a representative of the survivor community, as the one who, in his gentle and kind and compassionate way, shares these powerful messages.
Max has a goodness to him that just sort of radiates out. If you've had a chance to meet him, you know that there might be evil in the human heart, but Max shows you how much goodness is out there as well.
He commands the room with positivity and joy and captures the minds of his audience. I don't think this is because of something he learned or has practiced. To me, it's because he cares deeply about the mission of preserving the memory of the Holocaust, and more importantly, learning its lessons so it can never happen again.
When you hear his message and you hear his story, you hear about what happened, you hear about his family, but I think there's a lot he's never going to disclose. I think part of that is I think it's too hard. And the other part of it is I don't know, I think he recognizes that a lot of that hate and a lot of the unimaginable things he saw have no place in today's world and are not going to do good.
His story, while sad, has a lot of lessons for learning and lessons for the future and hope for the future.
When we decided to add the Dimensions and Testimony Theater to the museum, we knew that we had to have someone from Dallas participate. And Max really was the perfect person. Max just had such a varied experience during the Holocaust that there's so much that we can learn from him. With his amazing memory and storytelling ability, it means that our visitors can really learn that history in a way that personalizes it and makes it memorable to them.
It's inspiring to see that someone can come from a place so dark and bring so much light into our world and remind us that there are lots of different ways we can react even to the most awful, unspeakable horrors.
Max is the embodiment of hope for humanity.
Max is more than what happened to him when he was in those camps. That's important, and now let's learn from what he did before, during, and after.
I remember reading about Max and his taking the young adults on the March of the Living, and how wonderful it is for these kids to be able to get that first-hand experience through Max.
It's the trip that many Jewish and non-Jewish students and community members go to visit the sites throughout Poland and Israel that pertain to the Holocaust.
So we traveled together to Poland, including to the Holocaust concentration camps. He was a witness to history and create witnesses out of my classmates and I.
You know, I'd break down so many times during the trip with sorrow and emotion and anger. And I asked him, Max, how do you not break down when you go back to the camps, when you go back to the gas chamber where you yourself lost so many family members? And he told me, after so many years, I've been able to accumulate so many tears of joy that they counteract the tears of sorrow.
If I could use one or two words to describe Max.
If I could describe Zadie in one or two words.
You know, one or two words can't encapsulate what he is, what he means to me, and what he means to other people.
I would describe my grandfather as energetic,
vivacious,
quirky, delightful.
If I was saying in a joking manner, it's probably his two favorite words, but mechanically inclined.
Goofy,
spunky,
funny,
strength,
survivor,
tenacious. He does not let go. Some would say stubborn. I say tenacious.
I guess if you looked up in the dictionary the definition of resilience, it would say Max Glauben.
Max is life-changing.
He is the consummate optimist.
Forthright.
I would call him a teacher.
Persistent.
Inspiring.
Loving, caring.
Humanity.
Forgiving and fun.
And I would call him hopeful.
He's a beautiful human.
Very, very thoughtful and wise.
That's a hard one. I would probably say awesome.
There's a word in Yiddish and Hebrew, and it's a mensch. He is an individual that, in a positive way, wanted to make this a better world.
Whenever I hear someone say the word mensch, I automatically think Zadie.
Please welcome 2021 Hope for Humanity honoree, Max Glauben.
Max, on behalf of the Board of Directors of the Dallas Holocaust and Human Rights Museum, it's my pleasure and honor to present you, see, I needed your Kleenex.
I know, sorry.
With the 2021 Hope for Humanity Award. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. If somebody wants to take a picture, and it seems to be everybody has a phone, you might as well do it now. I've been given a few minutes to speak, and I speak from my heart and not from notes. But for this occasion, I decided to put some notes. Came somebody and told you the whole story I was going to talk about. Which means I'm going to look at this and tell you this. All we saw, the horrible things that happened during the Holocaust years. I will tell you how there is some goodness in this world, and the goodness that was given to me when I was orphaned, an unknown child, and maybe when I came to the States, according to my religion, that's all I can say, that if I went into a city, I was always invited to a synagogue, and I never, ever was a stranger. I think that it's appropriate for me to thank in generality, because names are mentioned already, and I'm not so good at names, but I have the chairman, event chairman, Candy and Ike Brown, and then honorary chairs and host committee, and the angelic, mind you, angelic Mary Pat Huggins, the CEO, and Mark Zilberman, board chair, that selected me as the 2021 Hope of Humanity, Hope of Humanity. Now it's real nice, you forget. Recipient. I'm going to have to change my whole thing because I will do things chronologically, and I do it from my heart. First, I want to thank everybody that's present here to know that I give him a thank you for being here, because it tells me what kind of upstander they are. And I also kind of thought, since my story was told already there, that we celebrate the Day of Atonement. And before we go to the synagogue, if we have any friends, we call them up, and if we have anything that we harmed them with or did to them that wasn't proper, you ask forgiveness. Now I know there's 1,000 of you, and there may be somebody that I offended or did something bad. I want you to forgive me. I am going to show you that there is goodness in this world, but it's shadowed with the badness, but somehow bad things create better stories, or I don't want to say anymore. Firstly, I would like to thank my parents in heaven looking down, and they were guiding me through all my life with the Hashem and some of the other Holocaust survivors, for bringing me into this world without knowing how or why we're gonna, or I'm gonna, or anybody is gonna approve and make this a better world. Then I want to say thank you for some of the departed few Holocaust survivors that had a dream and planted the seed for the Holocaust survivors creating the museum that we have. And because we were not too rich, our first idea was not for one that would be a beacon, an $80 million beacon that would be a one creating upstanders and showing both sides of the story, educating. I don't have this written down, but I saw there was an episode. I made 14 trips of the March of the Living. About 5 or 6 years ago, my time is blended in. I saw a bus drive up in Auschwitz-Birkenau from Israel with Israeli flags. People went down there with dogs, seeing our dogs. And I teared up. And I went over to the man that was guiding him, and I says, could I take a picture with one of the blind people, or with as many as want to take a picture with me? And he says, why would you do it? I says, during the Holocaust, the dogs maimed us and killed us. And this, what I'm seeing now, is the greatest proof that if dogs can be trained to help people, so can the people be trained to be upstanders and treat each other the way they like to be treated. I am going to talk more about my liberation and some of the things that happened to me without being able to have a family that would take care of my expenses, or any doctors that could help me, or for any food. So I was liberated by the US Army. A 2-week wonder, I think they called them, was a second lieutenant in the 179 Signal Repair Corps, picked up a group of us kids, realizing that after the Dead March, we had black clothes from blood that has hardened, that we couldn't make it anywhere. He gave us American uniforms, said, keep your mouth shut, and took us with him, and we settled in Nuremberg, Germany, where I lived for 2 years, and immediately lived an American life, became a mess sergeant for Polish guards and German POWs that were assigned to that company, and didn't have to go to a displaced person camp, which were a little bit closer to another concentration camp, but maybe with better things that were happening to you. By being there and doing a good job, I was introduced to the U.S. committee. Through them, I got papers, went to a council in Stuttgart, Germany, with some babies, and when the council saw the babies, he says, I need this group in the United States right away. Well, I thought he was talking about the babies. No, he was talking about the whole group. December the 13th, I arrived on a converted merchant marine ship, United States Marine, USS Marine Flusher, and I went to New York, not to the other port. Then I was placed in an orphanage on Caldwell Avenue in New York. Truly, I didn't like New York because I went to get something and I asked a person, where could I get this? Was a drugstore or what? And he says, do you see all these people? Why do you have to ask me? I says, I don't know if I want to stay in that city. There were no openings until December 31st. I was sent then to Atlanta, Georgia, and placed in a foster home. There I stayed with a Miss Rosenthal, and she was a lovely person. She had some children of her own, but I didn't know I was in a foster home, but I was also assigned to United Jewish Children, or whatever it was. And I was on a permanent visa, and I went on my own because I couldn't be confined. I always had to do something. So I got jobs, and when I became 18, I was drafted into the U.S. Army and brought to Fort Hood, Texas. On the weekends, I would come into Dallas, and I might say that I went to food service school, and I became a mess sergeant in the 1st Armored Division in the Company B of the 702nd Armored Infantry Battalion. While coming to Dallas, the people in Dallas were so wonderful that when I was released and had to still be in the Army for 3 years in active duty, I decided to stay in Dallas. I met my wife, and that was my love. And I met her in a home of a family that allow me to be a member of their family. That was the Fair family. Now, I got out in about April or May and decided to get married on June the 14th, not knowing that was Flag Day, and it was somebody else's birthday that maybe none of us like. But anyways, while I'm on the subject, I want to thank her for being a co-sponsor of my doings for 68 years. And yes, we had a good life, but it was also like the stock market. Ups and downs. But you know, by bringing a smile into your eyes makes me very happy. Let me just see here. I was fortunate enough to, with the help of my wife, have 3 children, Philip, Sherry, and Barry, and 7 wonderful children, grandchildren. But then came the greatest thing. We got 3 jewels, which are our great children. You already heard me being involved in the museum, and all I can say that the Holocaust survivors had a great deal to do with it. But I must say this, the angelic staff and the board and its CEO and its board of directors that don't know any difference of nationality, religion, because maybe I was one of the ones that said that the Holocaust was not a Jewish problem, it was a world problem. I want to thank them for the job that they have done in the last 9 years, that without their help, it could never have been accomplished. I was asked by the angel, called me to the office and says, Max, we are planning to put in a dimension theater. How would you like to work with the Shoah Foundation? And immediately I said, without any hesitation, think about it. That theater contains Holocaust survivors, because it's being changed every so often, and there isn't anybody that's in this room that cannot go in there and by voice recognition ask one of us a question and get it after we're gone. And the same goes for your children, your great-children, your great-great-children. And I consider this the greatest award. The other thing is I was sitting here by the table and eating, and a group of students that went with me on the March of the Living. I started in 205, 14 times, then I also went on 7 to Germany, and that made my evening. Because you can see with their behavior of who they are and what they are doing, and they are really becoming the leaders of our country and making this a better world. I'm going to finish with something that some people say you shouldn't do, or you should do, or whatever. Laughter, smiles, music, theater, the arts are a necessary commodity in sustaining a happy life. When I came to the States, I heard a song by Nat King Cole, not knowing that 1,500 artists made that song, but I found it appropriate to me and maybe to some other youngsters that survived, and I'd like to render a Max Glauben rendition. If you like it, put some more money on the table. And it goes like that, yeah. There was a boy, a very strange, enchanted boy. They said he wandered very far over land and sea. A little shy and sad of eye, but very wise was he. And then one day, one funny day, he came my way. And while we spoke of many things, fools and kings, this he said to me: the greatest thing you'll ever learn is just to love and be loved in return. I'm not finished yet. All the Jewish nice things are happening, and we have blessings for anything we do, even outhouses. I always like to say the blessing in Hebrew and then in English. And the blessing is the Shehayanu. It's Baruch Atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, Shehayanu v'kiyimanu v'higiyanu lazman hazeh. Blessed are you, Hashem, our God, King of the universe, who has kept us alive, sustained us, and brought us to this moment. Thank you very much for coming, and may God bless you.
But what I'm trying to relay, number one, that I feel like God has placed me here for a certain purpose, that I would speak up for the ones that didn't make it.
We as Holocaust survivors need to deliver our testimonies in a way that they don't bring hate.
I'm speaking and saying that unless we speak out and we become citizens that are concerned, that we vote in elections, that we don't let bad things happen without speaking out for it. And don't let somebody do something to your neighbor that you don't like. Tell them about it. And let them know that you are against it.
An upstander is a believer, an observer, somebody that cares, somebody that's a giver, somebody that has a good heart. I am a believer, and it so happens that my name is Believe, Glauben.
And these are the messages that I'm trying to relay, and I hope that I made the point across.